Welcome to the 8th episode of AI Horror Stories, the only anthology podcast that explores the eerie and unsettling capabilities of artificial intelligence through the lens of gut-wrenching narrative horror. I'm your host, Matthew T. Robinson, and I am joined by my spectacular co-host, Elizabeth Greenwald.
Ooh, spectacular. I like that.
Together, we'll drag you into the world of the unknown, where you'll witness nightmares so noxious, so nefarious, that they could only have come from the mind of a cold and calculating machine. So prepare yourself for a descent into darkness, where every shadow hides a new terror, and every whisper is a warning of impending doom. This is AI Horror Stories. How's it going, gang? Another day, another horror.
I'm doing great, actually. What about you, little guy? How are you doing? What's wrong with him, Matt?
Oh, I think I left him on mute here.
Come on, you gotta unmute him.
All right, I'm doing it. Hold on.
I'm fine. This is fine.
Good, because you know what time it is.
Yes, it's story time.
Damn right, it's story time.
What kind of story would you like?
How about a tale of someone on a deserted island?
Like in Castaway?
No, not like in Castaway. Do you want to get muted again?
Okay. Generating.
I awoke to a harsh sunlight streaming down on my face, my skin burning under its unforgiving rays. It was difficult to remember the events leading up to my sudden marooning on this island. The memories were there, hazy and disjointed, like a broken film reel. I recalled the small charter plane, the engine failure, and the desperate struggle to escape the sinking wreckage. As the first day dawned, the urgency of my situation began to sink in. I needed to focus on my survival. My primary concerns were shelter, water, and food. The beach where I had washed shore provided little in the way of cover, so I ventured into the dense foliage of the island in search of a suitable location to build my shelter. As I trekked deeper into the island's interior, I came across a small, clear stream that flowed from the heart of the island. I decided to build my shelter close by to ensure a consistent supply of fresh water. For materials, I utilized the bamboo that grew abundantly around the stream. With no tools at my disposal, I relied on the jagged rocks and brute force to cut the bamboo to the appropriate size. Over the next few days, I managed to construct a basic framework for my shelter, which I then covered with large palm fronds for protection against the elements. My hands were blistered and sore, but the small achievement of having a place to rest my head provided some comfort. With my shelter in place, I turned my attention to finding food. I'd spotted several fruit-bearing trees near my makeshift home and decided to gather what I could. Climbing the trees was a challenge with my tired, aching body, but I managed to collect a variety of fruits, including coconuts, bananas, and some small ripe berries that I hoped were safe to eat. The coconuts provided not only sustenance, but also hydration, as the sweet milk inside offered a refreshing drink. I found that the bananas were a welcome source of energy, and the berries, which I cautiously sampled, proved to be edible and delicious. As the days passed, I continued working on improving my shelter, gathering more food and exploring the island. Although my situation was far from ideal, I had managed to create a small pocket of comfort and stability. I began to hope that perhaps I could survive long enough to be rescued or find a way off this isolated patch of land. In the dead of night, I was startled awake by a peculiar sound. It was unlike anything I had encountered on the island so far. Peering through the gaps in my makeshift shelter, I could see small, flickering lights moving across the beach in the distance. My curiosity was piqued, and I wondered if these lights signaled the presence of boats or maybe people who could rescue me. Filled with a sudden surge of hope, I sprinted through the forest towards the source of the lights, the undergrowth snapping beneath my feet. As I reached the tree line, I stopped abruptly, my astonishment replacing the initial excitement. The lights were not from boats or people, but rather from countless crabs marching in a massive line down the beach. Their shells glowed with a mesmerizing blue-green bioluminescence. As far as I knew, no species of crab possessed such a quality. My curiosity piqued, I decided to follow the glowing procession. I walked alongside the moving army of crabs, careful not to step on any of them. The sight was both enchanting and eerie, as if nature had given me a front row seat to the mysterious performance. The crabs moved in unison, their bioluminescent shells casting an ethereal glow on the sands beneath them. As I followed the crabs, I wondered what could possibly be driving them to move together in such an organized fashion. Was it mating season? Were they migrating to a new home? Whatever the reason, their beauty and the phenomenon unfolding before me left me in awe. I trailed the crabs for what felt like miles, losing track of time as I became further entranced by their synchronized march. Eventually they reached a secluded cove where the gentle waves lapped at the shore. The crabs continued their journey into the shallow waters, their glowing bodies creating a breathtaking spectacle as they disappeared beneath the waves. I stood there, my feet sinking into the wet sand, reflecting on the unexpected marvel I had just witnessed. This island, which I had initially perceived as a desolate, forsaken place, had revealed a hidden wonder. Though my circumstances remained unchanged, the experience with the glowing crabs reminded me that even in the darkest times there could still be some moments of beauty and fascination. As the last of the glowing crabs vanished beneath the waves, the silence of the cove was broken by a deep and distant rhythmic pounding. I listened intently, my curiosity piqued once again. The sound was unfamiliar, yet it stirred something within me, compelling me to investigate. After a moment's reflection, I surmised that the pounding must be man-made. Could it be that these strange crabs had inadvertently led me to my salvation? With renewed hope, I set off towards the rhythmic pounding, trekking through the dense forest. As I drew closer, the sound began to take on the distinct characteristics of music, a pulsating beat accompanied by a melody of chanting voices. My desperation to reach the source of the sound overrode my caution, and my feet were gashed and torn by the thorny earth and underbrush as I hastened through the dark. Finally, I reached the edge of the forest where it gave way to a large clearing. The sight before me was extraordinary. A thriving community of people dancing and celebrating around a roaring fire. Undoubtedly, I had stumbled upon a tribe, one that was likely unknown to the outside world. This island, after all, was uncharted on all the maps I had salvaged from the wreckage. As much as I had longed to make contact and reveal myself, I hesitated. As I continued to watch the tribe's ritual from my hidden vantage point, a chieftain-like figure emerged in the center of the circle. He was a commanding presence, standing taller than the others, and was adorned with an armor made from the glowing shells of the crabs I had followed earlier. As he approached the fire, the chieftain held up a large domed shell from one of the crabs, its bioluminescent glow casting vivid light on his face. The chieftain raised the glowing shell high above his head, chanting a passage to the surrounding tribespeople. The drumbeat quickened and intensified, matching the fervor of the chieftain's words. From the edge of the circle, a tribesman stepped forward and knelt before the chieftain, tilting his head back in anticipation, and the chieftain carefully poured a glowing liquid from the crab shell into the man's open mouth. Almost instantly, the man began to twitch, his arms and body undulating in a grotesque and unnatural fashion. His skin bubbled and changed texture, becoming rough and uneven, while his color shifted to a sickly green hue. Before my very eyes, the man started to grow, his limbs elongating and his muscles bulging as he transformed into a monstrous, barely human creature. I watched in horror as one by one the members of the tribe underwent this ghastly metamorphosis. Each transformation was as harrowing as the last, with bodies contorting in grotesque ways, faces elongating and eyes bulging. The once fluid, graceful dancers now moved in a jerky, uncoordinated manner, as if their new forms were unfamiliar to them. It was as if the glowing liquid had unleashed something primal and savage within them, turning them into creatures more closely resembling the island's wild inhabitants than the humans they once were. As the final tribesperson completed their transformation, the drumming reached a fever pitch, and the monstrous figures began to dance once again. This time, their movements were aggressive and violent, a far cry from the harmonious celebration I had witnessed earlier. The firelight flickered wildly on their distorted faces, and I shuddered at the sight of their gruesome new forms. My mind raced as I tried to process the horrifying scene before me. What had I stumbled upon? Was this some form of ancient magic or curse that had befallen the tribe? Regardless of the explanation, I knew that I needed to tread carefully if I hoped to survive and find a way off this enigmatic island. In my shock and terror, I lost my footing, and with a sickening snap, a large stick cracked beneath me as I stumbled out of the tree line. The monstrous tribespeople, their grotesque faces contorted in surprise, jerked their heads in my direction. I knew I was exposed, clearly visible in the firelight that spilled into the darkness. For a brief moment we stared each other down, suspended in tense silence. Then, as if propelled by some unspoken signal, both the monstrous tribe people and I broke into full sprint. Panic surged through me as I raced through the jungle, my legs pumping with adrenaline-fueled speed. The creatures pursued me, their guttural growls and heavy footfalls echoing in the darkness behind me. My body ached and my breaths came in ragged gasps as I tore through the underbrush. The thorny ground slashed at my feet, but I barely felt the pain as I sprinted, driven by the primal instinct to survive. Branches whipped at my face, and my heart hammered in my chest, but I couldn't afford to slow down. The monstrous beings were relentless, and I knew that if they caught me, my fate would be sealed. As I pushed myself to the brink of exhaustion, I desperately tried to recall the path back to my makeshift shelter, hoping that it might offer some semblance of safety from the pursuers. My vision blurred with fear as I navigated the treacherous terrain, each step a desperate bid to stay ahead of the nightmare that chased me through the darkness. In a desperate attempt to evade the monstrous tribespeople, I scrambled up the nearest tree and wedged myself between the branches, doing my best to stay hidden in the shadows as I listened to the clicking noises of the creatures and the shouts of the other unchanged tribesmen as they searched the jungle below for me. The adrenaline coursed through my veins, and eventually I gave way to exhaustion, and I succumbed to sleep, my dreams haunted by the terrifying events of the night. When I awoke, I decided I needed a more concealed and secure place to hide, should the need arise again. I spent a few hours constructing a well-hidden shelter under the cover of a large fallen tree, using the natural debris and foliage to camouflage my refuge from any prying eyes. With this task completed, I felt a small measure of relief, but I knew that I needed to understand the connection between the glowing crabs and the tribe's supernatural transformation. I ventured back to the side of the island where I had first encountered the crabs, hoping that observing them might offer some answers. Night after night, I waited on the beach, watching and preparing for their return. In the meantime, I fashioned crude weapons and spears, my mind racing with theories about the mysterious events that had transpired on this uncharted island. After nearly 2 weeks of waiting, my patience was rewarded as the familiar sight of the glowing crabs appeared on the horizon. A strange mixture of relief and trepidation washed over me as I began to follow their eerie procession down the beach once more. As I trailed the glowing crabs, I pondered the possible explanations for their strange bioluminescence and their connection to the tribe's transformation. Was there some sort of toxin in their shells that induced the grotesque changes in the tribesmen? Or was this a phenomenon rooted in ancient magic or the supernatural? Regardless of the answer, I knew that unlocking the secrets of these creatures might be my only hope of unraveling the mysteries of the island and finding a way to escape. As I reached the cove where I had first witnessed the crabs disappearing into the shallow waters, I realized that I had gained no new insights into their mysterious march or their connection to the tribe. Desperate for answers, I decided to take a more direct approach. As the crabs began to vanish into the waves, I quickly reached down and grabbed 2 of them, one in each hand, making sure to hold them from the back of their shells to avoid their claws. The crabs writhed and snapped in my grasp, their legs flailing wildly in the air. As if sensing the capture of their brethren, the rest of the glowing procession halted momentarily, their bioluminescent shells casting an eerie light on the shoreline. For a brief moment, I was gripped by fear, half expecting the crabs to turn and attack me in retaliation. However, after a tense pause, the crabs resumed their silent march, disappearing into the waves and leaving me alone on the beach. The darkness broken only by the glow of the two crabs I held captive. With the sense of both relief and determination, I carefully carried them back to my shelter, intent on studying them further in the hopes of discovering the truth behind their strange connection to the tribe and their supernatural transformations. As I observed the crabs in the dim light of my shelter, I searched for signs of the glowing liquid that had been poured into the tribesman's mouth during the ritual. I knew that understanding the source of this liquid might be the key to unlocking the secrets of this island and finding a way to escape its grasp. I made the difficult decision to keep one crab captive and kill the other. I reasoned that if the chieftain had drunk from the crab's shell, the crabs must be an essential part of the ritual. But even as I considered my next step, I was plagued with uncertainty. Should I really attempt to extract and drink the glowing liquid? Was the transformation only temporary? Would I be irreversibly changed? Despite these doubts, I knew that it was only a matter of time before another dangerous confrontation with the tribe. Rescue seemed like an increasingly distant possibility, and I needed to find a way to survive on this island. Perhaps, I thought, if I could prove to the natives that I had mastered their transformative ritual and was willing to undergo it myself, they might accept me into their tribe, allowing me to live peacefully on the island. Determined to move forward with my plan, I snapped the leg off the crab, watching as the glowing liquid spilled out. The crab writhed in my grasp, and in my struggle to kill it and collect the liquid, almost all of it was lost. Frustrated but undeterred, I carefully removed the bowl-like shell from the dead and emptied crab and turned my attention to the second crab. I steeled myself and quickly snapped off several of its legs. The glowing liquid poured out, and this time I managed to catch it in the shell of the first crab, just as I had seen the chieftain do. Holding the shell full of the mysterious glowing liquid, I took a deep breath and began making my way through the forest towards the area where I had first encountered the tribe's village. As I reached the tribal camp, I discovered that they were in the midst of another ritual, just like the one I had witnessed before. The timing felt like fate, and I knew this was my chance to confront them. Mustering all of my courage, I stepped out from the tree line, drawing their attention as I called out, "Hey!" The drumbeat ceased abruptly, and the entire tribe turned to stare at me, standing in the firelight. I could see the surprise and curiosity on their faces as I raised the shell above my head, mimicking the chieftain's actions from the first ritual. Doing my best to replicate the sounds of the chieftain's chant, I prepared myself for what was to come. With a deep breath, I brought the glowing bowl to my lips and drank the bitter liquid in one swift motion. As the tribesmen cheered and gathered around me, their smiles seeming to welcome me into their fold, I felt the first painful waves of transformation begin to take hold. My skin bubbled, my bones cracked, and my limbs stretched unnaturally. As I succumbed to the darkness, I couldn't help but wonder if I had made the right choice, or if I had just sealed my fate forever on this mysterious and uncharted island. And that liquid turned out to be Taco Bell Mountain Dew Baja Blast.
Actually, Mountain Dew Baja Blast is comprised of approximately 10% natural fruit juice, with the primary flavors being pineapple, lime, and tropical.
Got it, buddy. We know it's not really Baja Blast. It was a joke.
Ha ha ha. I get it.
But do you, though?
Yes, I understand that your joke was a playful reference to the transformative power of the liquid in the story, which you likened to Mountain Dew Baja Blast from Taco Bell. Just as the character in the story was changed into a monster, you're humorously suggesting that Baja Blast has a similar, if not quite as dramatic, effect in real life. It's an amusing way to comment on the impact that certain foods or drinks can have.
All right, it would seem that you do get it.
All right, boys. I think it's time for some stories now.
What kind of story would you like?
How about a story about a young girl who gets invited out to drink with her friends in a graveyard?
Generating.
The idea of drinking in the graveyard had never appealed to me. Ghost hunting, my friends called it, but I was skeptical. My mother had always warned me about the dangers of meddling with the paranormal. When I was first asked, I hesitated, my reluctance growing with each passing moment. My friends, however, were relentless in their persuasion, insisting that I join them for this once-in-a-lifetime experience. After what felt like hours of coaxing, I gave in and decided to tag along. As I arrived at the graveyard, I met my friends in the parking lot where the rest of the group was slowly trickling in. The air was damp and heavy, a thick fog weaving its way between the ancient tombstones. The atmosphere weighed on me, amplifying my unease.
So are you ready for some ghost hunting?
My friend asked, a mischievous glint in his eye. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a smile, trying my best to hide my apprehension. Yeah, sure, I replied. Let's do this. We stood there waiting for the others to join us, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the verge of making a terrible mistake. The rest of the group arrived, their loudness and belligerency apparent even before the open-windowed truck rounded the corner into view. They were already drinking, and their laughter echoed off the cemetery's stone walls. It seemed as though they had no respect for the sacred ground we were about to trespass on. We began to make our way into the graveyard, with the group attempting to shush one another in between their tasteless jokes and boasting about who was the most fearless. They took swigs of beer, further fueling their raucous behavior. While they joked and jeered, I remained on high alert. My eyes scanned the graveyard, taking in the eerie shadows cast by the moonlight on the tombstones. I had a nagging feeling that we were not alone and that we should have heeded my mother's advice about not meddling with the paranormal. We eventually made our way to a large mausoleum near the edge of the cemetery, its walls covered in ivy. The group settled down on the steps, laughing as one of the boys hid behind the mausoleum, feigning a scare. I looked up at the tomb and read the name etched in the stone. I suggested that we move along and not sit on this person's resting place. However, my friends brushed off my concerns.
Relax.
One of them said, offering me a beer.
What's he gonna do? We're looking for ghosts. If he shows up, we'll snap a picture of him and get rich.
I rolled my eyes, unable to shake the feeling that we were tempting fate. As my friends continued their revelry, drinking and smoking, they started a game of truth or dare. Though I reluctantly participated, my attention remained fixed on our surroundings. I felt like something was moving at the edge of my vision, always slipping away whenever I tried to focus on it. Trying to outsmart any potential onlookers, I laughed along with the group, giving off the impression that I hadn't noticed anything. Meanwhile, I let my eyes drift slowly to the side without moving my head, allowing them to adjust to the darkness. To my horror, I realized that we were indeed being watched by not just one entity, but hundreds of them, creatures of impossible shapes and sizes, as dark and formless as the night itself surrounded us. I couldn't help but scream. The group was startled, cursing and yelling at me, demanding to know what was wrong, and all I could do was point. The creatures, now undeniably seen, began to reveal themselves. Some recoiled at my scream, hiding behind gravestones, while others didn't move at all, as if they had understood the situation more. Slowly, they emerged from behind the trees, stones, and the darkness, and one by one, my friends became aware of the terrifying presence. Panic ensued as each person either screamed, froze in fear, or scrambled to their feet, knocking over beer cans and stepping on phones in a desperate attempt to escape the encircling army of nightmarish beings. Someone shone a light on one of the creatures, revealing a grotesque, flashy form. One of the creatures approached me while I stood frozen in terror, as my friends had already scattered in every direction. The monster was grotesque and sickly, its skin mottled and decayed, hanging loosely off a twisted frame of bone and sinew. It had multiple arms and legs, each joint bending unnaturally, and its face was a nightmarish collage of misplaced features. Yet, as I stared into its eyes, deep dark pools that seemed to hold the weight of eons, I saw intelligence. The creature formed something akin to a crooked smile, and inexplicably, I sensed warmth radiating from it. Taking a deep breath, I tried to calm my racing thoughts. It appeared as if the creature wanted to communicate with me. It gestured toward the crowd of onlooking entities still lurking in the shadows and then began walking. Feeling as though I had no choice, I followed the creature. As we moved through the graveyard, the remaining mass of forms trailed behind us, an eerie procession illuminated by the moonlight's ethereal glow. We crossed the fields of the graveyard, the creature's mismatched limbs and contorted bodies moving in an otherworldly dance. I wondered what they wanted from me and where they were leading me. Despite the horrifying scene unfolding around me, I felt an odd sense of trust in the creature guiding me, as if it had a purpose beyond my understanding. The creature led me to a clearing at the far end of the graveyard, where another mausoleum stood, its stone enclosure open and a faint blue glow emanating from within. The creature gestured for me to enter, and with trepidation I did. Inside, I found a corpse propped upright, clutching a small stone with a runic symbol carved into it. The rune pulsed with a powerful light, casting the blue glow I had seen as I approached the mausoleum. The creature gestured to the stone, silently urging me to take it. Though I couldn't speak, it was clear that it wanted me to hold the stone in my hands. Hesitantly, I reached out and pried the cold stone from the corpse's hand, its rigid fingers cracking in the process. I turned back to the monster, which wore what seemed like its attempt at a comforting smile. In an instant, the creature disintegrated into particles of ghostly dust, the same color as the glow from the stone, which was now fading rapidly. I looked out of the mausoleum's doorway to see the army of following creatures meeting a similar fate, each of them fading and blowing away in puffs of blue dust. As the last of the creatures vanished, I was left standing in the mausoleum, clutching the now dim stone, wondering what had just transpired and what I was meant to do with this mysterious artifact. I left the graveyard, making my way back to the now empty parking lot. My friends had fled the area, abandoning me in the chaos. I checked my phone, which was filled with frantic text messages from the group, asking if I was alive and urging me to respond. Instead of replying, I turned it off and walked home, still holding the rock firmly in my hand. Upon arriving, I handed the mysterious stone to my mother and told her that it needed to be locked away, never to be returned to the graveyard. Without asking any questions, my mother nodded solemnly, taking the stone from me with great care. She locked it inside a small wooden box she had kept on the mantel, then carried the box upstairs into the attic. As I watched her disappear into the darkness, I felt an odd sense of relief mixed with lingering questions. What had happened that night, and what was the true purpose of the stone? The answer to these questions may remain forever hidden, locked away just like the enigmatic artifact now resting in the attic.
I like that her friends booked it and ran.
Seriously.
One thing I just don't understand, though, is why all of those monsters were so friendly. Didn't we tell you we wanted horror?
I'm sorry. I thought it was scary.
Little guy, I'm gonna have to stop you right there. You're a little off today.
I tried my best.
Fair enough. It's okay, but we do need one more story.
What kind of story would you like?
How about a story of some homely folks that just have a bad day at the farmhouse?
Generating.
Well, let me tell you, the sun was heading on down, throwing a spooky light all over our little farmhouse. The air was thick, just like trouble was a-brewing. Henry, my old man, and I couldn't quite shake this gnawing unease crawling through our bones. Our cozy home felt like something yanked straight from a nightmare.
It all began innocent-like, with our animals getting all oddball on us. Charlie, our trusty pup, started growling at nothing, his fur bristling like he had a run-in with a porcupine. And our dear little Patches the tabby turned wild as all get out, hissing and spitting whenever we stepped foot near the barn.
Days slid into weeks and things just kept getting worse. The land, once buzzing with life, went dead as a doornail. Not a peep from the birds or the critters. Just the bone-chilling moans of the old windmill like it knew something we didn't. But it wasn't just Charlie and Patches who turned on us, no sirree. It was every darn critter on the farm. Our chickens, once pecking and clucking in their coop, turned into something out of a horror flick. You see, one morning I went out to collect the eggs, and them chickens went ballistic. Their eyes all crazy like they lunged at me, pecking and scratching with a frenzy I'd never seen before. I barely made it out of the coop alive, my clothes torn and blood dripping from 100 tiny wounds.
And that wasn't the end of it. Our sweet cow, Bessie, went from a gentle giant to a snorting, stomping machine of rage. She'd glare at us from across the field, her eyes burning with a fire that make your skin crawl. One day, as I went out to milk her, she charged like a wild bull, head low and hooves digging into the ground. Jessamay screamed for me to run, and I scrambled out of the way just in time, the wind from her passing nearly knocking me off my feet. Even the sheep, docile creatures if there ever were any, became something to be feared. They'd cluster together, bleating with a sinister edge, their once soft eyes now cold and calculating. We had no choice but to steer clear of them, but we could feel their gazes following us like a shadow.
One cold night, while Henry poked at the fire, we heard a low growl rising from the cellar. Our hearts near jumped out of our chests, and we eyed each other all wide-eyed. Quiet as church mice, we crept down them shaky stairs, hands dripping sweat like a sow at a cookout. The growl grew louder, filling the pitch-black room. And there he was, Charlie, our once loving dog, staring us down with eyes gone wild and mean, blood smeared all over his snout, and he had something gripped tight in his mouth. It hit us like a ton of bricks. Our best friends had turned on us. We were scared out of our wits, but something inside us said to skedaddle. We dashed up the stairs, barely avoiding Charlie's chomping jaws, and we slammed that door closed and locked it up tight, trying to keep the evil at bay.
It was then that our safe haven turned into a war zone. Night after night we endured them unholy sounds from outside, growls and hisses and howls that turn anyone's blood to ice. The animals we once loved had turned into bloodthirsty monsters, always on the prowl. As the days rolled in, the world outside got darker and meaner. Word got around about them same horrors happening everywhere. Gentle creatures, once loyal and sweet, went plumb crazy on folk. Cities became a living nightmare, drowned in blood-curdling screams.
The two of us were holed up in our crumbling refuge. We knew we couldn't hide for good. We stretched out our supplies, watching our sanctuary morph into a prison cell. The scratching and clawing on the windows and the doors grew louder, a grim reminder that we was caught in a war with the beasts of the earth. But the real true test came one fateful night when our defenses failed us. The barricade crumbled with a thunderous crash, and them animals poured in, eyes gleaming with pure malice. Patches, who used to snuggle in my lap, lunged at me, claws flashing. Henry fought with the might of a grizzly, but Charlie bit down on him hard.
And then, as Jessamine tried to shake Patches off, I caught sight of Bessie storming into the house, kicking and bucking like she was possessed. The floor trembled beneath her hooves, and I felt my heart sink deeper with each thundering step.
And them chickens, too, descended on us like a swarm, pecking and tearing us with a wicked fury. Feathers and squawks filled the air, blinding and deafening us as we fought to survive the onslaught. And as if things couldn't get any worse, the sheep joined the fray, their bleats now warped into spine-chilling screeches. They bared their teeth and bit into our flesh, no sign of mercy in their cold, dead eyes.
Agony was surging through us, our strength fading fast like the dying light. My screams tangled with the snarls and screeches, creating a heart-wrenching chorus of anguish. In those final moments, Jessamine and I locked eyes, and our love and desperation mingling in one soul-crushing stare. We knew we was losing the fight, and our dreams of a tranquil life were being ripped apart. Out yonder, the moon hung high, shedding a ghostly light over our forsaken land. The world was theirs now, them animals, and we was just intruders in their realm. Our struggle was over, and we was left to the mercy of our once trusted companions, now turned into ruthless beasts.
As we lay there battered and beaten, we prayed for some kind of miracle, a sliver of hope that might see us through this living nightmare.
Oh, we prayed.
But the darkness pressed in, and we knew in our hearts that things would never, ever be the same again. Them critters done took over, yes sirree. They're running the show now.
Damn right. And that's all we have time for today, folks. Thank you, as always, for listening. And please join us again next week for the next episode of
AI Horror Stories.